What if I told you that Africa's most populous nation, home to over 220 million people, was artificially created by a colonial power that deliberately divided its people to maintain control? Nigeria, the giant of Africa, wasn't born from the will of its people. It was carved, calculated, and constructed in the boardrooms of London and on the battlefields of West Africa. This is the story of how Britain divided Nigeria, creating a colonial giant that will struggle with the consequences for generations to come. By the time Nigeria gained independence in 1960, the British had spent nearly a century merging over 250 distinct ethnic groups, speaking more than 500 languages into a single colonial entity. But this wasn't unity, it was a strategic division. The British employed a masterful policy: divide and rule. Pit the North against the South, the Muslims against the Christians, the Hausa Fulani against the Yoruba, against the Igbo. Keep them competing, never uniting, and you control everything. Now, let's cover how this happened, with names, dates, and the calculated decisions that shaped modern Africa. You see, before British interference, the territory we now call Nigeria was home to sophisticated kingdoms and empires, each with rich histories spanning centuries. In the north, the Sokoto Caliphate, established in 1804 by Osman Dan Fodio, and was one of the largest empires in Africa, spanning over 500,000 square kilometers. This Islamic Caliphate controlled territories across modern-day northern Nigeria and parts of Niger, Cameroon, and Burkina Faso. Cities like Kano, Sokoto, and Katsina were bustling centers of trade, Islamic scholarships, and governance. In the southwest, the Oyo Empire had dominated the region since 15th century. The Yoruba kingdoms, including Oyo, Ife, and later Ibadan, were sophisticated political entities with complex governmental structures. The Oyo Empire controlled trade routes to the coast and maintained diplomatic relations with European traders from the ports of Badagry and Lagos. In the southeast, the Igbo people operated through decentralized village republics and town assemblies. They had what historians call stateless societies, complex networks of governance with centralized monarchies. The Aro Confederacy, centered in Arochukwu, controlled trade networks extending across southeastern Nigeria, using their oracle, the long juju of Arochukwu, as both spiritual authority and commercial regulator. Along the Niger Delta, kingdoms like Borno, Calabar, and Brass has become wealthy merchant states, serving as middlemen in the transatlantic trade for centuries. These were not primitive societies, they were organized, prosperous, and self-governing. But everything changed when British commercial interests arrived. Britain's penetration of Nigeria began not with soldiers, but with merchants. In 1807, Britain abolished the slave trade and began searching for legitimate commerce in West Africa. Palm oil, used in soap, candles, and as industrial lubricants during Britain's Industrial Revolution, became the new price. British traders established themselves in Lagos and Niger Delta throughout the 1830s and 1840s, but it was George Goldie who would become the architect of British Nigeria. In 1879, Goldie founded the United African Company, later renamed the Royal Niger Company in 1886. This wasn't just a business, it was a colonial instrument with its own army, courts, and administrative power. Goldie's company signed treaties with local chiefs along the Niger River, treaties that chiefs often didn't understand would surrender their sovereignty to his foreign corporation. Meanwhile, in Lagos, the British had been interfering in local politics for decades. On August 6, 1861, the British bombarded Lagos, and forced King Dosumu to sign the Treaty of Sishi, making Lagos a British colony. The official reason, to suppress the slave trade, but the real reason, to control the lucrative palm oil trade and establish a strategic foothold. Consul John Beecroft and later Governor Henry Stanhope Freeman established British authority in Lagos, which would become the colonial capital and gateway to the interior. As Europeans' power competed for African territory in the 1880s, the famous Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885 changed everything. Chancellor Otto von Bismarck of Germany convened a conference which brought together representatives from Britain, France, Germany, Portugal, Belgium, and other European nations. Not a single Africa was invited to this meeting, where Africa was divided like a birthday cake. The conference established the principle of effective occupations. European power had to demonstrate actual control over territories they claim, and this sparked the scramble for Africa. If you want to understand the Berlin Conference, kindly check the video at the top. In the video, we explain how European countries divided Africa like a birthday cake. Now, let's get back into the story. George Goldie's Royal Niger Company became the instrument of conquest. Between 1886 and 1900, Goldie's forces, using Maxim guns, artillery, and riverine warfare, subdued communities along the Niger and Benue rivers. The company wasn't just extracting resources, it was establishing sovereignty. Every treaty signed, every village conquered, expanded British claims against French expansion from the west and German ambitions from the east in Cameroon. By 1900, the British government realized the Royal Niger Company was too valuable to remain private. On January 1, 1900, the British Crown revoked the company's charter and assumed direct control, creating the Protectorate of Northern Nigeria and the Protectorate of Southern Nigeria. Establishing former protectorates was one thing. Actual control required military conquest, and the British were prepared for war. The architect of Northern Conquest was Sir Frederick Lugard, appointed High Commissioner of Northern Nigeria in 1900. Lugard faced a formidable challenge: the Sokoto Caliphate, controlled vast territories with organized army, and wouldn't surrender easily. The conquest of the north was systematic and brutal. In March 1903, Lugard's forces, including the West African Frontier Force (WAF), composed of British officers and African soldiers, attacked the ancient city of Kano. The defenders of Kano, armed primarily with swords, spears, and outdated firearms, faced British Maxim guns and modern rifles. The Battle of Kano lasted just one day, February 3, 1903. Over 300 defenders died. The British lost less than 30 men. But the decisive battle came at Sokoto, the Caliphate's capital. Sultan Atahiru I refused British demands to accept subordinate status. On March 15, 1903, British forces stormed Sokoto. Sultan Atahiru fled eastward with thousands of followers, hoping to perform Hijra, a religious migration away from infidel rule. Lugard's forces pursued them. At the Battle of Brumi in July 1903, Sultan Atahiru was killed along with thousands of his followers. The Sokoto Caliphate, the most powerful Islamic state in West Africa, had fallen. In the south, resistance was equally fierce but more fragmented. The Aro expedition of 1901 and 1902 saw British forces destroy Arochukwu, the commercial and spiritual heart of Igbo trade networks. The Long Juju shrine was demolished and Aro power was shattered. In the Niger Delta, the British conducted numerous punitive expeditions against communities resisting taxation and trade monopolies. The Benin expedition of 1897, though technically in the Midwest, saw British forces destroy the ancient Benin Kingdom and looting thousands of bronze artworks. The famous Benin bronze still held in British museums today. after killing Oba Ovonramwen's guards and burning the royal palace. By 1914, Britain controlled two separate protectorates, northern Nigeria and southern Nigeria, which included the Lagos colony. They operated under different administrations, legal systems, and economic structures. On January 1, 1914, Lord Lugard, now a governor-general, merged them into a single colony, the Colony and Protectorate of Nigeria. This amalgamation was purely administrative convenience. Lugard's reasoning: the prosperous South could finance the administration of the poorer North. Lagos customs revenues would subsidize northern costs. But Lugard never intended to create a unified nation. He explicitly maintained different systems of governance for North and South, implementing what would become known as indirect rule, ruling through existing traditional authorities. In the North, Lugard worked through the emirs and the existing Islamic administrative structures of the former Sokoto Caliphate. The emirs collected taxes, administered Islamic law, Sharia, and maintained order, all under British supervision. It was efficient and cheap, and it preserved northern feudal structure. In the South, particularly the Southeast, indirect rule failed. The Igbo had no centralized monarchies, so the British created artificial warrant chiefs with no traditional legitimacy. This sparkled the Aba Women's Riot of 1929, when tens of thousands of Igbo women protested those imposed authorities and new taxation system. The amalgamation created a country, but not a nation. The North and South remained separate worlds under one flag. Britain's genius and Nigerian cause was the institutionalization of division. The British created a three-region structure that added ethnic identities and sparked competition. The northern region, dominated by the Hausa Fulani, Islamic, ruled through emirs and deliberately isolated from the southern influence. The British restricted Christian missionary activity in the north and limited Western education, maintaining what some historians call a cordon sanitary around northern society. The western region, dominated by the Yoruba, mixed Christian and Muslim population, were educated and urbanized, with Lagos as its crown jewel. The eastern region, dominated by the Igbo, predominantly Christian due to aggressive missionary activities, highly educated and entrepreneurial. The British administered each region differently, creating imbalanced development. While missionaries built schools across the south, the north remained educationally stunted. By the 1950s, southern Nigeria had literacy rates 4 times higher than the north. The British also employed a deliberate strategy in recruitment and administration. Northern soldiers filled the military and police forces, seen as more mature and less politically agitated. Igbos dominated the civil service and commerce. Yorubas filled the professional classes, law, medicine, and journalism. Governor Sir Old Clifford explicitly stated in the 1920s that Nigeria was not one nation, but a collection of self-contained and mutually independent native states. The colonial government played groups against each other. When southern elites demanded self-governance, the British pointed to the backward north as justification for continued rule. When northerners grew restless, the British warned them about southern domination. This wasn't accidental, it was policy. As independence approached in the 1950s, these divisions became political powder kegs. Political parties formed along ethnic lines. The Northern People's Congress (NPC), led by Sir Ahmadu Bello, the Saldana of Sokoto, represented northern interests. Action Group (AG), led by Chief Obafemi Awolowo, represented Yoruba interests. And the National Councils of Nigeria and the Cameroons (NCNC), led by Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, had Igbo-based but claimed national appeal. Constitutional Conference in London, 1953, 1957 and 1958 negotiated independence terms, but northern leaders feared southern domination. Sir Ahmadu Bello famously stated, "The new nation called Nigeria should be an estate of our great-grandfather Othman Dan Fodio. We must ruthlessly prevent a change of power." To protect northern interests, the British ensured the north, geographically larger but less populated, though census figures were disputed and likely manipulated, would have more seats in the federal legislature. On October 1, 1960, Nigeria achieved independence with Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, a northern Muslim, as Prime Minister, and Nnamdi Azikiwe, an Igbo Christian, as ceremonial Governor General, later President, when Nigeria became a republic in 1963. The British left behind a nation structurally designed for conflict. Within 6 years of independence, Nigeria would experience its first military coup, January 15, 1966, a counter-coup, July 29, 1966, ethnic pogroms killing tens of thousands of Igbos in the north, and the devastating Biafran Civil War 1967 to 1970 that killed over 1 million people. The divisions Britain created remain. Every Nigerian crisis since, from the Civil War to the ongoing insurgencies by Boko Haram, elder farmers' conflicts, and separatist agitations, traces back to the colonial architecture. Britain created administrative boundaries that forced together people with different religions, languages, histories, and political cultures. The colonial government never invested in creating common national identity, shared institution, or integrated infrastructure. Instead, they built a system where every group competed for control of the center, because controlling the government meant controlling the entire country's resources, especially after oil was discovered in the Niger Delta in 1956 at Oloibiri. Nigeria's post-independence history has been a struggle to overcome its colonial design. Multiple constitutions, civil war, coups, military dictatorships, and even today, calls for restructuring or outright dissolution. So how did Britain divide Nigeria? Through military conquest that destroyed existing kingdoms, through amalgamation that forced together incompatible territories, through indirect rule that preserved and added ethnic difference, through deliberate policies that developed regions unequally, through a constitution designed to maintain division after independence. Britain didn't just colonize Nigeria, they engineered its eternal conflicts. The making of this colonial giant wasn't the birth of a nation, it was the construction of a crisis, one that Nigeria continues to navigate today, over 60 years after independence. Lord Lugard once said, "Nigeria was a mere geographical expression." Perhaps that was the most honest thing any colonial administrator ever said about the entity they created. The question Nigeria still asks today is, can what Britain divided ever truly be united? If you find this video insightful, please like, subscribe, and share. Check out our other videos on African colonial history and let us know in the comments, do you think Nigeria's divisions are still primarily a colonial legacy, or have Nigerians themselves contributed to these problems since independence? Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Peace.